It began, as all things in our village do, with the morning light that swept across the plains, turning the dew-kissed grass into a sea of gold. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of acacia trees and the distant lowing of cattle. I was a young warrior at the time, a guardian of our cattle and a student of the elders. Our village, nestled in the heart of the Massai lands in the Great Rift Valley, was known for its vast herds and proud warriors. Tradition and honor ran deep in our blood, guided by the ancient ways passed down from the ancestors. Our chief, Obianuju, was a man of great stature, both in spirit and in the respect he commanded. His eldest son was the village's pride, destined to inherit his father's mantle and lead our people as had been done for generations. But the winds of fate are unpredictable, and the prophecy that had loomed over our village for years began to stir. It had always been spoken of in hushed tones around the evening fires. The prophecy that foretold a time of turmoil when our leader would not come from noble blood, but from an unexpected place, marked by Ankai. That is the name we call God. The elders dismissed it as a story for the young, a tale meant to instill awe and respect for the mysteries of the world. But as the Libon, the spiritual leader, often reminded us, the gods worked in ways we could not always comprehend. And so, the prophecy remained, simmering in the background, waiting for its moment to be realized. That moment came suddenly, like the strike of lightning. One morning, word spread through the village like wildfire. The chief's son had fallen gravely ill. It was a sickness unlike any we had seen, a shadow that drained his strength day by day. The finest healers and laybons gathered in the chief's homestead, their faces etched with worry as they worked tirelessly to combat the illness. Yet, despite their efforts, the young warrior succumbed, leaving the village in mourning and the future uncertain. I stood at the edge of the crowd that had gathered outside the chief's kraal, feeling the weight of the loss settle over us like a heavy blanket. Obianuju, our chief, stood motionless, his face a mask of grief, without an heir. The question of succession hung in the air like an ominous cloud. The Maasai way dictated that only a warrior of noble blood could lead, but with no one left to claim the title, our village was thrust into chaos. For days, the elders convened in the chief's kraal, debating who would take up the mantle of leadership. I often saw them gesturing wildly, their voices rising in heated argument. Tradition demanded a clear successor, yet the path forward was anything but clear. The elders debated late into the night, their shadows cast long against the flickering firelight. Chief Obianuju remained silent during these discussions, his gaze fixed on the horizon as if seeking answers from the gods themselves. In the midst of our grief and uncertainty, there lived a young woman named Nazirian. She was not of noble birth but was the daughter of a humble cattle herder. Her family had tended the herds for generations, and she grew up learning the ways of the land, how to navigate the savannah, where to find water, and the secret language of the animals. Her beauty was renowned throughout the village, but it was not just her outward appearance that caught the eye. There was a quiet strength in Nazirian, a grace in her movements that seemed to belong to the land itself. While others saw her as simply a herder's daughter, I sensed something more in her. I often watched her from a distance, as she moved through the village with a calm determination. She was not one to boast or seek attention, and perhaps it was this humility that set her apart. Yet, even as whispers of the prophecy began to swirl around the village, none could have predicted what was to come. It happened during a communal gathering at the chief's kraal. The elders had called for a meeting to discuss the future of the village. Nazirian, like many of the young women, was there to help serve water and food to the gathered warriors and elders. As she bent to pour water into a clay cup, the elder Libon, who was seated nearby, caught sight of a mark on her shoulder. He paused, his eyes narrowing in recognition. Nazirian, the Libon called, his voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. The crowd fell silent, all eyes turning to her. Nazirian looked up, surprise flashing across her face. "Yes, Libon," she replied, her voice steady despite the unexpected attention. "Show us the mark on your shoulder," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for refusal. A murmur rippled through the crowd as Nazirian hesitated, then pulled aside the fabric of her shuka, traditional Massai cloth, to reveal the mark. It was a symbol carved like the horns of a great bull, resembling the ancient carvings on the stones that stood at the village's edge. Gasps filled the air, and I felt my heart race. Could it be? Could this mark signify what the Libon had often spoken of? The mark of Ankai, the Libon exclaimed, his eyes wide with awe. She bears the sign of the chosen one. The declaration sent a shockwave through the gathering. Some elders immediately began to argue, saying that she was merely a herder's daughter and unfit to lead. Others, however, remembered the prophecy. The leader shall come not from noble birth, but from the plains and the cattle, bearing the mark of the divine. They murmured. I glanced at Chief Olemuniak, whose face remained impassive, though his eyes revealed the turmoil within. From that moment, the village was thrown into debate. Some were outraged at the thought of Nazirian, a commoner, taking on the role of leader. They clung to the old ways, insisting that only a warrior of noble blood could rule. Others, however, began to believe that perhaps the prophecy was coming to pass before our very eyes. As the discussions grew more heated, one voice rose above the rest, that of Mbeshan, a warrior with a heart full of ambition. Mbeshan was known for his strength and cunning. He had always desired power and saw Nazirian's emergence as a threat to his aspirations. I observed him from a distance as he moved through the village, speaking to those who would listen, sowing seeds of doubt. She is no leader, he would say, his voice laced with scorn. A herder's daughter cannot possibly rule us. Despite the mounting opposition, the Libon and several elders insisted that Nazirian undergo the trials of the Massai to prove her worthiness. These trials were not merely physical. They tested the spirit, wisdom, and courage of the one who sought to lead. If she succeeded, it would be clear that she was the true leader chosen by Ankai. If she failed, she would be cast out, possibly even killed for defying the gods. The first trial was held at dawn at the sacred waterhole, where the spirit of the waters was said to reside. The task was simple in theory. Nazirian had to summon the spirit to rise from the water, a feat that only one blessed by Ankai could accomplish. I stood at the edge of the crowd as she approached the water, her silhouette stuck against the morning light. She knelt by the water's edge, closing her eyes and stretching out her hands. The air was thick with tension, and even the birds fell silent. Nothing happened at first, and a murmur of doubt spread through the crowd. My heart pounded in my chest. Could the prophecy be false? Then, a ripple spread across the water's surface, followed by a soft blue glow. The water began to rise, swirling into the shape of a great bull, before cascading back into the pool. A collective gasp swept through the crowd, and I saw tears glistening in the eyes of the Libon. Nazirian had passed the first trial. The second trial, known as the Trial of the Plains, required Nazirian to venture deep into the savannah to find the rare white acacia flower. This test was both a trial of endurance and a measure of her understanding of the land. She set off alone, her figure soon swallowed by the horizon. Days turned into nights as the village waited, anxiety gnawing at our hearts. Mbeshan, who had opposed her from the start, muttered to his followers, convinced that she would not return. But in return she did. On the fifth day, Nazirian reappeared, her clothes tattered, her face weary yet triumphant. In her hands, she held the white acacia flower. The village erupted in cheers, and I felt a swell of hope. She had proven that she was not only of the land but had mastered it.